start the transcript. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Business Go Electric event for Bedford Council, Bedford Borough Council. Hopefully you're expecting to be here and not expecting to be somewhere else. We are just going to wait for a couple of minutes while people come in. What you may have seen as you've come in is that the transcript has been enabled. That is so that the council can share this on their social media channels afterwards. If you want to turn it off, you should have the option down at the bottom of your screen, along with the other controls that you get through when you use Zoom. It should be there. You can just turn off the subtitles if you don't want to see it. Hopefully. Let's see how we're doing. All right, we've got 12 people here plus the 3 of us, so we'll get going in just a moment. Okay, I think other people can join us as we go along. So welcome everybody. Like I say, this is a Business Go Electric event for Bedford Borough Council, but also welcoming businesses from around the area as well. So if you're from Central Bedfordshire or Luton, welcome to you as well. You're very welcome to be here. I hope you find this useful and informative. My name is Mark Smith, and I'm one of the regional account managers for the Energy Saving Trust's Local Government Support Programme. I cover roughly the South East. My colleague Heather, who's also with us on the call, covers the Midlands. So between us, we cover kind of the area all around where you are. Also on the call as a presenter, we've got Alistair Barkley from Bedford Borough Council, who's going to tell us a bit more about kind of the reason for this webinar and what Bedforders are up to in their area as well. So what we're going to go through today is all about EVs. So we're going to talk about kind of some of the reasons to switch, and particularly why you should electrify your fleet, a little bit about charging in the workplace, and then moving on to talk about a few of the myths around EVs and hopefully bust those myths and improve your understanding of EVs and how they work and what they can do and what they can't. A little section on funding as well, and then go into a bit of a Q&A at the end. So in preparation for that Q&A, you should be seeing something like this screen. So please do, if you've got any questions, pop them into the Q&A box, where Heather or I will be monitoring those as they come in, and we'll pick them up at the end, as many as we can, and if we can't get to them, we will do a written response after this webinar as well. So before we get going, it's a little bit about us as the Energy Saving Trust. We're an independent organisation, and we work to address the climate emergency. We work across businesses, individuals, communities, and local governments to help them save energy and reduce carbon emissions. As an organisation, we're around about 350 odd people. 50 of those work in our transport team. So we cover all various different sorts of transport. So our work particularly is on local government, but we've got teams that advise on fleets and fleet decarbonisation and other sustainable and low carbon travel initiatives as well. The team that Heather and I work for, the Local Government Support Programme, and this webinar is a fully funded programme from the Department of Transport, and what we exist to help local authorities to roll out EV infrastructure and other sustainable transport measures as well. That's enough from me just for a moment. I'll hand over to Alistair Barkley, who's going to tell us a little bit more about Bedford. Alistair.
Hi, yeah, I'm Alistair Barkley. I'm the Travel Planning and Engagement Officer for Bedford Borough Council. And yeah, just got a couple of slides to let you know what, as an authority, we have been doing. So the first point really is that we got a photo of Mayor Dave with a bit of infrastructure there. But as an authority, we declared a climate emergency in 2019, and that involved a target to be net zero carbon by 2030 for the authority. But we're also aiming to support businesses, to support the business community in achieving these goals too. Some of the things we have done to date include investing over 100 charging points around Bedford Borough, and we're actively looking for funding to deliver more. The Energy Saving Trust, for example, coordinates the local electric vehicle infrastructure pilot programme, and we have applied for some additional funding from that. Should we have the next slide, please, Mark? So what we are doing as an authority in terms of our Go Electric programme, we are investing in a fleet of low carbon vehicles. So the first thing we did as part of that is to produce an audit of the whole fleet. So that was our first step. The recycling team already have 2 electric vehicles that they use. So you know, if someone needs a new green bin or something like that, they can pop it in the back of the car and go and take it to people. We are also very soon to be receiving 3 electric car club cars via Enterprise, and these will be used as staff pool cars. So the idea being is that rather than staff using their own vehicles to travel across the local authority, they can, as a first port of call, use one of these car club cars. So if they're traveling to meetings, they can get to those quite easily. So the onus will be on managers to try and ensure that the staff are using it, and if they you know, rather than claiming miles on their own private vehicles, which can give the staff more of an incentive to walk or cycle or catch public transport into work. Should we have the next slide, please, Mark? I work in the sustainable transport team, so one of the things that I'm, you know, one of the great things that we've got, one of the great assets we've got when we're working with schools and in the community is our cargo bikes. So we have, well, we received DfT funding for 6 electric cargo bikes back in 2020. Again, that was through a report organised by the Energy Savings Trust. We have one of those bikes at Harold Country Park, so the team used that there. Another one's used by Flamme Rouge Cycles, one of the independent cycle shops in town. But yeah, we several teams that the local authority use the cargo bikes to do their work. It's very, very integral to the work that we do at the in the sustainable transport team. This is our event bike, which we lift up and it forms into an event table. So it's quite a cool little thing. But also we also carry bikes and scooters around the authority to work with school children. So you know, that's one of the great assets that we've got. So cargo great bikes are really, really cool in terms of last mile type things, or you know, I'd like to say last 4 miles, because you know, looking at the scope of Bedford Borough, you know, it lets us get out to quite a lot of schools that we got locally. We've also purchased 6 electric fleet bikes. So as well as the car club options, you know, for engineers visiting sites or for social workers needing to get out and about throughout the authority, they've got the option of the pool cars, but they've also got an electric bike they could potentially use. So we should be rolling that out in the next couple of weeks. We've already purchased the 6 bikes, so that we're just sort of working on a program to sort of allow staff to basically log in and use them, basically. In addition to all that, we do have charging points. We've got a couple at Hall in the underground car park. We've got a bank of just normal plugs which charge the cycle fleet, but we've also got a couple of fast chargers for the cars in our Brunel Road and Berks Lane depot, which is mainly where our fleet is. We have got quite a few charging points there as well. I mean, so some of the sweeping trucks and things like that, they're already electric, but again, we're looking at sort of rolling that out a lot more. We've also financially supported a lot of the infrastructure that's gone in at Bedford Station, which includes some e-charging locks, and we are looking to install some more of those in town. Okay, that's it for me now. I'll pass you back to Mark and Heather.
Perfect, thanks, Alistair. That's really great. And taking off of a leaf out of Alistair's book from his last slide there, I just want to highlight that although we're here today to talk about EVs, this is what we call the sustainable transport hierarchy. And what I'd like you to have a look at here is just how far down this hierarchy EVs actually come. So we'd encourage you, when you're thinking about your business and what works for you, if you can do it digitally, or you can do it through active travel of some description, or using public transport, we would still encourage you to use those methods instead of just opting for the van or the EV straight away, particularly if you're making sort of local deliveries or anything like that. That would be the most carbon friendliest thing to do, is to not travel and do it through digital communication. Obviously, that doesn't work for everything you're doing as in your businesses, but certainly the most eco-friendly option. There we go. And there's some other low carbon support options as well. So a couple of things you can see up here is the National Cycling Scheme. National E-Cycling Scheme is available in your area. It gives try and ride sessions and long-term loans for e-bikes and e-cycles, including e-cargo bikes if you are making local deliveries. And if you're living in the right areas of Bedford, and if you've got contacts in Milton Keynes, they may have seen, or you may have seen, some of the little robots on the top right-hand side of your screen coming around. That's the picture from the launch in Bedford of Co-op's autonomous robot delivery service. That's something to look out for. Perhaps a bit out of reach for most of the smaller businesses, but never say never. And then the 3 reports down the bottom of the slide are other reports that we have produced as Energy Saving Trust about how you might be able to electrify your last mile, and whether or not an e-cargo bike might be the right thing for your business. I would encourage you to go and have a look at those reports to find out a bit more if you are interested, and we can circulate the links along with the slide deck from this presentation as well. So back onto EVs. Why should you switch? Well, a couple of the main reasons for switching, obviously, big one being the climate emergency. You heard Alistair talk about it for Bedford, but it's received kind of enough national coverage in the last couple of years. I don't think I'd say too much about climate emergency, but transport is one of the biggest areas of emissions for our country. So it's around about 26-28% of emissions throughout the last couple of years. And what we've seen since 1990 is that all the other kind of big sectors of emissions for the country, so industry, domestic, energy production, that kind of thing, they've all decreased their carbon intensity over that time. But transport has remained stubbornly high, despite the fact that vehicles are getting more efficient. We all know that miles per gallon has gone up with successive releases of new vehicles, but thanks to more cars on the road and more of those vehicles being heavier vehicles, so the tendency towards SUVs rather than smaller cars is increasing, is maintaining that carbon emissions rate from transport. So still quite some way to go from a carbon reduction point of view for transport. Also, air quality is an issue. So perhaps not so much in some areas of central Bedfordshire, but certainly in our towns and cities, there's going to be some areas of poor air quality. And air quality is known, or is suspected to contribute to around about 40,000 preventable deaths per year in the UK alone. And there's an increasing public awareness of the impact of poor air quality, and more calls for the UK to bring in some legislation or some regulation to get our nitrous oxide emissions within the legal limits that we are supposed to be hitting. In addition to that, from an economic point of view, obviously there's a global market for EVs and EV technology. There's around about 40% year-on-year increase in EV sales since 2019. So we're certainly looking at quite a big economic opportunity. If that's something that your business will be able to take advantage of, it's worth thinking about. Whether you can get involved in that supply chain. But the government has this ambition to position us, as you may have seen in the recent EV strategy, as a world leader in the design and manufacture of electric vehicles. So there's certainly some scope for inward investment in that sense as well. What are we actually talking about here? So we're thinking about battery electric vehicles, or BEVs, or BEVs, or 100% electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, pure electric vehicles. They have all sorts of different names depending on who you speak to. But we're looking at the vehicles on the left-hand side of the slide. So things like a Nissan ENV200, Hyundai Kona. You saw a Nissan Leaf in a previous slide as well. If you need something slightly bigger, you've got the Vauxhall Vivaro E, and a number of other vans on the market as well now. If you need something really big, there are some options for heavier trucks as well, including Arctics in some cases as well. These vehicles, there is a bit of variety across the range, across what's available, but they tend to have somewhere between 120 and 300 miles of range, and that's true even for the vans when they have a full payload in them as well. And the vans, not the cars so much anymore, but the vans certainly are eligible for the plug-in car grant, which will give you an amount off of a brand new van if it's still available. There's only a certain amount of that per year, but it's certainly something to look into. To give you a bit of an idea of costs of the vans, looking at around about £50,000 for that Vivaro E on the slide there, are before the plug-in car grant. So they're still not a cheap investment, but they're approaching price parity with a standard diesel van, although they're not quite there yet. It's expected to come in the next few years or so. And then the other side of the slide is the plug-in hybrid. So they've got significant electric range, as well as having an internal combustion engine to take them kind of the rest of the way. So the electric range on these tends to be about 20 to 50 miles, again, depending on kind of the payload and what else you're doing. But these are some of the vehicles these are the vehicles that will be, the new sales of which will be banned from 2035, along with everything else that's going to be banned before that as well. But if you do make a significant number of longer mile trips, that might be worth considering a plug-in hybrid rather than a battery electric for the moment. Although, as I say, technology is changing so fast that it might well be that by the time you've got your plug-in hybrid, there will be a battery electric vehicle on the market that would be able to do it as well. But one of the real benefits of these vehicles is that they are in many cases, especially for the battery or for all of the battery electric vehicles, they do not have to pay. You do not have to pay for entering a clean air zone or an ultra low emission zone or a zero emission zone. Depending on where you are, depends. I don't know. Obviously, we don't know what businesses you're in. But if you are making deliveries into London, that could represent quite a significant saving for you, especially if you're doing that, 2 or 3 times a week or so. And as it says on the bottom of the slide there, for most of the grants that are available, like the plug-in car grant that I was talking about on the last slide, vehicles have to be emitting less than 50 grams of CO2 per kilometre at the tailpipe, have a minimum travel distance of I think about 20 or 30 miles with no emissions whatsoever. So that's where the plug-in hybrid bit comes in. And this slide, just to say, there's quite a significant range of different vehicles on the market now. Everything right from kind of the e-cargo bikes we've seen a few of already, all the way up to refuse collection vehicles at the bottom and the bigger trucks and vans like that as well, depending on your needs and what your business does. But that's enough from me for the moment. I will hand you over to Heather to talk about charging. Heather.
Thanks so much, Mark. Yes, very much going to go into deep kind of looking at what the jargon is around charging, how it's slightly different to a petrol or diesel, and hopefully just kind of breaking down those barriers. As we know, things are very much changing. Some of you may already be electric vehicle drivers and know about most of this, and some people might not be. So I appreciate it's trying to cover every person. So just going on to jargon busting. What we normally talk about with cars and charging is you'll hear kilowatt hour and kilowatt. So usually on a electric vehicle, the battery will always be given in a kilowatt hour. So just the measure of energy that goes into the vehicle. We normally like to use a bit of the bathtub analogy of the kilowatts is usually the measure of power, and that's normally given in terms of a charge point. So of course that would depend on how much electricity goes into the vehicle. So of course the larger your car battery on kilowatt hours, so I've got a 24 kilowatt hour battery, Mark's got a 40 kilowatt hour battery. Most newer vehicles are now 50 to 60 kilowatts. And of course, that will mean more mileage as well. And also you'll find the newer batteries also a lot more efficient. I've got a second-hand car, so mine are slightly different kind of first generation batteries compared to the newer vehicles that are from 2017 onwards to 2020. So of course, that will be the amount of energy that goes into a car and the amount of range. Now, typically a kilowatt hour will give you about 3 to 4 miles. And of course, like with anything, the heavier footage you are, the less miles you'll do, very much like a petrol and a diesel. And similarly, being more efficient will give you around about 3 to 4 miles. And as you will kind of talk about a bit further in myth busting, is that the newer cars do drive more like a normal vehicle. Mine's slightly driven a bit more efficiently, but of course mine is 2015 version car. So yeah, we always like to use the kilowatts in terms of the measure of power into a charge point. And you'll hear 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt, 50 kilowatt, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail of what that actually means, but that's usually the amount of power that will charge your car faster. So just going on to kind of a few more bits on charging, what we'll also look at is that the charge point will of course always dictate the amount of charge. So at home you'll probably charge on a 7 kilowatt, that will be slightly slower. So it's never, you know, just looking at your vehicle, what charge it can take, and you'll notice on most newer vehicles it's one charge point, and they're normally called a CCS cable. You'll notice a couple of the charge points will have 3 connections. Usually this is for the second-hand vehicles that have what we call a CHAD mode connection, which is kind of more Nissan Leafs, things like that, and more legacy kind of second-hand vehicles. And they're there to make sure that you've got access to a charge point and you can charge up. Of course, most people will charge overnight because it's slow. Also is usually cheaper. You'll find this on the Podlet network as well. It's cheaper to go on what we class as a slow or fast charge. So it would take a kind of an overnight charge, but those that are much faster will be more costly. And we'll go through a bit more of breaking down what the costs mean as well. And of course, charge time always depends on your distance driven, not necessarily on the battery size. And we'll go through a bit more in that with the range, going through demystifying things. So that's kind of kilowatt hour in your battery, the power, how that will work in terms of charging your car. But we've also got a bit of jargon busting. You'll sometimes hear, well, that charger is AC, it's alternating current. You normally get that into your house. Most cars can take direct current. So what they have to do, if they're taking it from your house, they have to basically have an onboard charger to convert AC to DC and charge your charge in your car. But all cars will have that. But of course, it just means that the higher charge, and if it's a direct current, the faster that goes into your battery because it's directly there. But it's just some jargon if you do hear that with infrastructure between the two terms. So just going on from that, so I've kind of lightly touched on different rates of kilowatts charge points. So this just gives you a rough indication of charging. Now the time at the top is based on a kind of a average size of battery, so around about 40 kilowatt hour battery. But of course, the larger kilowatt battery you have, the longer it might take to charge. So home charging. So you can charge on a 3-pin plug. However, we do talk about safety with that because of the rate of charge and also being on your main board. So if you are looking at it as a business, putting that into maybe people that take their vehicles home or have company cars, it's being very much aware to try and give them a charge point to make sure they also can take advantage of smart charging, which came in law in July. Which basically means that you can manage the energy that goes into your vehicle, take it from the grid at night when there's less demand. Also can be cheaper. Sometimes there are overnight tariffs that you can go into, but always put a caveat that they sometimes come with a higher day rate. And of course, it's making sure that they can take advantage of what we class a fast charger. So most home charging units that come in can actually do up to 7 kilowatt charging. So it makes it go from a 10 to 12 hour to 4 to 6 hour charge. So basically come back at 6 or 7 at night and you're leaving 6 or 7 in the morning, you'll have enough time to charge the vehicle. With the lamp columns, you'll see most of these in London. Some areas, unfortunately, do have lamps that are set back into the road and they have bollards, but they are very much slow, what we call trickle charge, which is the same as a 3-pin plug. Sometimes could be a lot less. 3-pin plug's about 3 kilowatts. A street lamp can be between 2 and 3 kilowatts. So again, they're very much more for the slow overnight charging as well. So with the fast charging, that is between 7 and 22 kilowatts. Of course, you might have seen some around the Tesco's for free. Some of them are slightly faster rapid chargers, which are up to 50 kilowatts. They're usually a payable service. The slightly slower ones or faster ones are cheaper. And you'll find this in most council car parks will have a kind of a slower charge, but of course they are a slightly cheaper rate. And for workplaces, we usually say between a 7 and 22 kilowatt, because it won't add necessarily too much energy to what you already have in terms of demand. And most staff will be there for 6 to 7 hours anyway. So it allows them to charge during the day. And some businesses either offer that for free or just cover the costs for the energy as well. So with the rapids, of course, these are the slightly larger ones. So these usually come with charge points. So when I mentioned that there will be 3 cables, you can see on the en route image, that's what I was talking about. There'll be one for the newer cars, the CCS connection, one for the CHAdeMO, and usually kind of a secondary one for a slightly slower charge. And of course, the newer ones that you'll see popping up at a lot of destination chargers, Instavolt, there's Grid Serve as well, that are doing a lot of destination charging. So of course, these will charge a car from about 0% to 80 within about an hour. Of course, it depends on how big your battery. So this was a 40 kilowatt hour battery, so the bigger your battery, it's going to take longer. And this is where the ultra rapid charge points are coming into play. So these are the 120 to 350 kilowatts charge points, not quite as much as Tesla. I think they're around about 399 kilowatts, or a bit more. But with those, these are trying to resolve the kind of almost 15 minutes, go and grab a cup of coffee, come back and your vehicle will be charged. And of course, the cars that can take this are usually the newer electric vehicles than the older models priced to kind of 2020. But of course, it is making sure you check that with your vehicle and what charge it can take in. Similarly, with the 22 kilowatts, not all cars can take 22 kilowatts, but they can take up to 11. But then they can also charge at 120. So it's always good just to check your specs, definitely if you're doing a lot of large distant miles. As you know, the average commute is around about 50 miles for most people. And of course, about 60% of travel is under 5 miles as well. So, you know, it's making sure you have the right kilowatt battery for the right need. And of course, if you're able to charge overnight, or you don't have access to off-street car parking, what the public network can provide you as well. So just going on from that, I'm going to go into a bit of the myth busting and go into a bit of the range of vehicles. So the range of vehicles has changed dramatically from when kind of the first vehicles were coming out in 2011. Usually a car around about 2015 could do about 130 miles on average. And as we've seen over that time, batteries have become more efficient. We've seen slightly larger batteries, and you can find that most electric vehicles now will be over 200 miles in range. Of course, if you go for the slightly snazzier models, we are finding they're about 250 to 300 miles in range. Of course, battery performance can be impacted by a number of factors. Driving style, I've mentioned before, the heavier footed you are, the more your battery will be used. You will, of course, notice that there'll be regenerative braking, which puts power back into your battery, but it's also being aware of, you know, building the car to speed. But of course, the heavier you are, you're going to use less, basically there'll be less miles that you'd get. Extremes of temperature can be quite impacted. I say when it comes to winter, it's very much like your battery in your phone. It won't be as energy efficient, but I only find that I lose about 3 or 4, maybe 5 miles on my battery when it is slightly colder. And in summer, you get a much more battery mileage out of it. And you can definitely tell that I get about an average of about 10 miles more when it's slightly warmer as well. So of course, when it comes to looking at kind of different charges and how that would affect it and types, there's less of an issue now on that because of course batteries are making sure that these are fit for purpose. And as we know, around about 40% of energy is lost with fuel vehicles that go to the wheels, whereas with the electricity, 90% of that energy goes direct to the wheels. So it is a lot more efficient in terms of fuel to use as well. So there are around about 32,000 charge points now in the UK. You can find more on ZapMap, and we'll have a little bit of a map further down of where those are. The government has an aim to meet 300,000 charge points by the end of 2030. And as Alistair kind of mentioned, there's a big programme that's going on about how to improve the infrastructure, because the government have removed the grants for small vehicles. They haven't removed it for the vans and large vehicles, but their aim is to remove that grant from the slightly smaller, because the market's there. Now 1 in 4 cars purchased are now electric. That's now going into infrastructure, how they can build that aspect up now. And there's a big piece of work going on that by next year, all motorway services will have at least 6 high-powered charge points. We're finding that a lot more are trying to go for more than 6 charge points, but of course it depends on location. So these are where the kind of charging hubs are coming out. As I mentioned, those kind of 350 kilowatt. There's a lot of what we call hubs going, there's some in Essex and further afield, because they want to have more of a demand as well. So in terms of vehicles, I know that Mark touched on this last time, but this is just to give you a bit of an overview of electric vans and their payloads, because that always seems to be a kind of key question people ask. You know, as the batteries are slightly bigger, they're heavier, what does that mean? So with the range, you can see from the Nissan V200, that does have a slightly smaller mileage. It is a smaller battery. And you can kind of go all the way up to the Vauxhall Movano, which has slightly more miles, 140. And you will find within all of these models, they have smaller batteries to larger batteries. So you can get more out of them, but of course that will cost more. When it comes to the payloads, we are finding that they are very much keeping within the 1 ton. In terms of range and how that affects it, we've got a lot of businesses that are using these now and case studies, and all of the mileage is very much real life, fully loaded vans. So there isn't much difference within it. It's very much driver behaviour, talking with the teams and making sure that they understand the vehicle and using it effectively. But we're finding that a lot of them find it suits their need, going from Nottingham to Manchester and charging them and back again. So we are finding that these vehicles are very much proving their worth. And as Mark will say, by about mid-2020 or kind of late 2020s, these will become price paritative, because there'll be more in the second-hand market as well. So it's basically having consideration that this might be your next vehicle, or plans to do that by 2030. And we'll go more into kind of the cost as well, because there are a lot of benefits with the whole life costings of electric vehicles, including maintenance as well, which is greatly reduced. So going on to the battery, because we always get a question of, well, how much is it going to cost to replace a battery? It's going to be really expensive. How do we do it? So this image is basically what the batteries look like. We always kind of akin it to a lot of Duracell batteries that make up a larger battery, and that's basically effectively what the electric vehicles have. So if a cell, for example, does degrade, you basically take that cell and replace it. So you're not replacing the whole battery. And there are a lot of supports around this. There are a lot of electric vehicle approved garages that can provide you more information, and HEVRA, which are basically approved electric vehicle repair services that can kind of give you more information, and they can do that kind of work as well. So it's not necessarily the dealer you need to go to, but there are approved garages as well. Of course, with that, there are a lot more sureties than there were 10 years ago. I say my vehicle is almost 6 years old, and it's got 100% battery life. Of course, it's making sure that you do use it effectively, so not overcharging it all the time or under. So usually it's more effective being kept at around about 10 to 20% of battery and not overcharge more than 80%. But of course, it's, if you need it the next day, fully charge it and then use it. Warranties on most of these are 8 years. We're finding that batteries now are lasting 12 years plus and over 100,000 miles. So there's a lot more confidence in batteries. And the end of its life. So a battery, when it reaches the end of its life, is usually about 80% effective. So it actually has quite a lot of energy in that. So what it's usually used for at the moment is secondary energy storage. And of course, as that does increase, there is a growing industry behind this. Veolia have just had a plant approved. There is a small plant in Sheffield that does recycle batteries, and that is all of the battery, all components, because there's materials in that that are very valid, and with the current supplies that I'm sure you're aware of that's happening around Europe at the moment, and the industry trying to repurpose as many materials as part of circular economy. And that's really vital to the government's programme, and that's being led right now. I say a large plant in Veolia in the north west is being made as well, and that's going to create a lot of jobs as well. Of course, there are a lot of concerns around the batteries, similarly with your mobiles and your laptops, you know, where those materials are coming from. And that is very much where the manufacturers are looking at their supply chains, trying to look at that. And of course, as I mentioned, with the circular economy, looking at how we can repurpose materials as well, because of course the impacts from not only the environmental impacts of some of these elements from mining and also the lakes that are created for these for the lithium, but also the human aspect. And that's something that very much supply chains are being reviewed on at the moment, part of the government UK policy, and making sure that that can be improved and help those that are in those situations as well. And also reducing manufacturer emissions is a key part, and that is kind of going on to the next slide as well, just to kind of show you what I mean in terms of reducing manufacture from the batteries. So just to give you an idea, so with making a electric vehicle is of course going to be more carbon intensive than it is for a petrol and a diesel vehicle, but the main impact of those is the use of fuel in them over its lifetime, and as you can see the ton of CO2 over that vehicle's life is a lot more impactful than it is with a battery electric. What the market is doing is looking at how to reduce that carbon in the manufacture of those batteries, and also ensuring that permits are in place to make sure that that is part of it. And I say there's a new Nissan electric vehicle manufacturer going to be built also in the UK. And of course, you might have seen recently the battery electric making our own batteries in the UK, the British Volt, Volt, I think it's called, and that's going to also be bringing that back in, so we can use those materials that are made from recycling and also repurpose as well back into the economy. And of course, the main thing for decarbonisation is where we produce the energy from. So as you know, we are moving away from coal, trying to support more renewable green energy, and that's what would reduce the carbon. So even if you're looking at a high, what we class greenhouse gas minerals case, you are looking at that being much lower than an internal combustion engine with petrol and diesel. So that's the key thing, is it moves from one fuel source to another, and try and remove into more renewables industry, and decarbonising from central government how we will do that with the commitment to net zero by 2050. So in terms of kind of grid capacity, we get a lot of questions on this. So, you know, how are we going to meet the demand? We're going to have all these vehicles, and can the grid cope? So we work very closely with the district network operators who work with National Grid, and they have already looked at the proposals for electrification of vehicles, and making sure that we can have in place an improved energy efficient system. So there are a lot of changes coming up in April to effectively do that. Reinforcement works for not only the electric vehicle grid, but also decarbonisation of buildings and much more with the industry. So they've looked at that and they've seen that there will be an increase, but they really want to look at how we can switch more to kind of overnight charging. So where maybe vehicles are not being used by businesses between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., that they could take from the grid when there is less demand and there's actually availability. Similarly with battery storage, taking from renewables on site that will also reduce your cost, making sure that we've got everything there. And one of the big things that's being looked at the moment is vehicle to grid or vehicle to everything, which is we've got lots of battery capacity in vehicles and how they could help with the energy demand as well. But at the moment with UK government, there are plans in place to support with the uptake of grids and looking at more kind of smart systems and approaching getting electricity back into the grid. So there is a lot of support around that to upgrade the national grid infrastructure and money behind that too. So I'm going to leave Mark to go on to the business case aspects and to kind of break down some of those kind of discussions on costs that I've kind of reached on before.
Great, thanks, Heather. Yeah, so I want to have a quick chat about the business case for electric vehicles. And the biggest thing to say here is that when if you electrify your fleet, as a result of doing that, you get around about 60 to 70% carbon saving on over and above your current fleet. There's obviously benefits around tailpipe emissions as well. So there's no tailpipe emissions. So you're going to improve local air quality. If you've driven an EV, you'll know this, but they have a much smoother, much quieter driving experience. There's been research by ZapMap, or has been picked up by ZapMap, that EV drivers are less stressed as a result of their kind of improved driving experience when they've been driving an EV. We've already touched on this a couple of times, but although there are higher upfront costs at the moment, the running costs for an EV are quite a lot lower. Even with the recent energy price rises, it still works out as cheaper to run an EV than it does to run a diesel vehicle at the moment. And we'll cover that more on the next slide. But as I already touched upon, you get the penalty-free access to the congestion zones. On top of that, you've got no road tax to pay, and you've got lower servicing and maintenance costs because there's fewer moving parts in an EV than there are in a diesel van. And as we've already kind of touched upon in the myth-busting section, there's more and more models coming out at a variety of different price points. So there's likely to be something around for your business, depending on what you do. It's going to be not that far off being price parable to a standard vehicle. This is what I was talking about around the business case, around the case for running an EV and it not costing a fortune. So this is with, okay, this slide's perhaps slightly out of date now because it's 28p a kilowatt. So if you're on a new fix, you're going to be paying more than that, but for your domestic energy at least. But this slide just illustrates, and you can see even if you doubled the price per kilowatt for a domestic energy consumption, it's still going to be cheaper per kilowatt and per 100 kilometers to drive an EV than it is to drive pretty much everything else. So it works out very well. It works out to, like I said on the slide, around about 9p a mile at absolute most at the moment. You can, if you get sort of slightly unlucky with the public network and you find a really expensive one, you might be paying around sort of 65, 70p a kilowatt. But again, it still works out cheaper than doing many other things. And there's a huge number of charge points around, as we'll see on the next few slides as well. Yeah, hopefully that gives you a good idea of just how much better it is to drive an EV in terms of the cost to run it once you've got it. I think there's some research been done around the carbon savings as well. It was done, but it compared a Polestar 2 with an XC40, Volvo XC40, and essentially on a standard European electricity mix, they figured out that you'd have to drive something like 40,000 miles in the Polestar before you reached break-even point with the emissions from the XC40. So there's a lot of benefits to this. So in terms of particular considerations for your fleet, you've got to think about the higher cost versus what you're saving to run the vehicle, but also what you're paying as your kilowatt hour charge. I know for a lot of you that business rate, that energy price is going to go up in the next few months, particularly for your business premises as well as for your drivers doing if they're recharging at home as well. But it's likely, I guess, I mean, we need to wait and see what the price rise actually brings, but it's likely to still be kind of comparable, at least to driving a diesel or a petrol vehicle. You've also got the cost of charging infrastructure to think about when you're considering switching to an EV fleet, and there are grants for this, like we said a couple of times, and we'll come on to those in a little while as well. But yeah, it is a cost, and you need to think about it. But it's generally not too much. I think you can get charge points now from around about £300-400 for a wall-mounted charge point. If you've got your own premises, you can pop on the side of the wall, and you can drive. You can charge, as Heather was saying, drive overnight. But there's the considerations as well around kind of what your mileage profile is. And if you're doing a high daily mileage, you've got more to think about in terms of what's possible with the range of a current vehicle. But if you're doing a low annual mileage or a low daily mileage, it's likely to stack up quite quickly in your favour. Also worth thinking about as part of that profiling, what's the profile across your whole fleet? So could you use your vehicles more effectively, and therefore do you need less vehicles than you've perhaps currently got on your books? Making some efficiency savings in having less vehicles on the go as well. And could you combine some of those trips or some of the uses of those vehicles, particularly if you've got a few cars or a few vehicles that are doing kind of very low annual mileages? Are any of them suitable for switching to an active travel method? And equally, could any of them combine in a way that means you can still get your work done by using less vehicles? Heather's already touched on the payload limits and kind of what you can do in terms of how much you can carry. So there's not too much more to say about that. There's also we've touched on kind of charging times in the myth busting section as well. There are some limits to this, obviously. If you don't have a lot of downtime during the day for your vehicles, but you would need it in order to get a good day's work out of an EV, then that's going to present more of a challenge potentially. And equally, if your drivers have got an opportunity to charge at home, is there on-street parking nearby, or will you need to look at installing something at your premises? In many cases, actually, if there is on-street parking at home or at your drivers' houses or off-street parking, and that's the arrangement you have with them, you may not need to install anything at your depot, or you may not need to install as much at your depot, which obviously is then another cost saving as well. Well, then there is then the implication of how drivers pay for their mileage, but there's certainly ways around that as well. If you've got telematics in your fleet, that can really help understand with the kind of developing understanding of all of this. And I'm sure if you have got telematics, you'll be looking at some of this already. But it's worth kind of looking into the data you can get from any telematics systems you do have, just to understand a bit more about kind of what your fleet's doing and how you might be able to make some of these efficiencies and switch to an EV. Now, if you do want to buy a new EV, get researching, essentially, like it says on the slide. Do your research. There is a lot more range on the market than there was a few years ago. We would suggest, though, that you do have a look for an electric vehicle approved retailer or dealer. That just is another scheme that's administered by us at Energy Saving Trust. And what it means is essentially that the sales and the after sales staff will know what they're talking about when they're trying to sell you an EV. They'll know how to answer your questions. They'll know how to answer, how to deal with some things around the after sales care and how you charge it. And I hope to answer your questions specifically on the technology of the vehicles that they're selling, and obviously give you the details that you need, your warranties and that kind of thing. They've also got the correct services and equipment or facilities and equipment to service your EV. And in most cases, they'll probably have some on-site charging provision as well. And now that we're out of COVID and you can do proper test drives again, some of them may offer the opportunity to do an extended test drive in an EV. It's becoming kind of more and more common, as you probably have seen, ability to take away an EV for a couple of days and really kind of apply it in your business to see if it works properly for you or not, or kind of get you thinking about the adjustments you might need to make to take best advantage of that vehicle. If you don't want to kind of buy a new car outright, or if you lease your fleet, there's also kind of lease and subscription options as well that you've probably seen. I know I get them on Facebook all the time, but there's an increasing amount out there, and they cover kind of everything you might expect a lease agreement to cover. Equally, you can also buy used. As Heather said, there's an increasing used market for EVs now. It is worth checking kind of the spec that you would need. Again, just do that little bit of research, make sure you know what you're getting. You don't want to end up expecting to have plenty of battery, but then you've missed it on the paperwork and it's actually smaller than you're expecting. Equally, some of the very early Renault Zoes, which is one of the early electric vehicles that came out around about 2014, some of them still have a battery lease on them. So it's worth making sure, just so that you know that you're in for that when you purchase the vehicle. It is fair to say that that's not a lot of vehicles now, and Renault stopped offering that I think about 2016, so So if you're looking at the significantly older fleet, you're looking at that. Equally, if you are looking at your fleet as in a more holistic way, and you're thinking, do I actually need these vehicles? Is there a car club near you? And Alistair alluded to the enterprise car club that is being set up for the council staff. But is there an opportunity, perhaps through a car club membership, on or near your premises to try an electric vehicle before you have to commit to buying one? And then again, another way of reducing your reliance on your fleet as well. There's if you could use kind of a car club to replace some of your fleet, that's another option as well. Thinking about kind of decarbonisation more widely, think about decarbonising how your staff commute to your premises as well. Could they car share? Could they drive an electric vehicle? How could you incentivise them to take up an electric vehicle for their commute? Equally, could they use active travel for their commute? There's a lot of ways kind of you can do that around sort of salary sacrifice, pool cars at the car club we spoke about just now, promoting public transport, promoting car sharing, or indeed, as many of us are now, just working from home. Do you need that many staff to go into your premises on a regular basis? Could you make kind of further savings and downsize those premises as well? Not the right option for everybody, I appreciate that. But certainly something to think about when you're thinking about how you could decarbonize kind of your overall business, and not just your business travel that you're paying for. Like we said, around kind of finding charge points, this is a map kind of quite a broad area around Bedford and Luton. But you can see obviously charge points, as you might expect, concentrated in some of the major towns. But you can also see there's the options in the more rural areas as well. So you are pretty likely to be able to find a charge point before you completely run out of charge, pretty much wherever you are around Bedford as well. And to give you a rough idea of the pricing, as we were talking about before, prices, it depends what network you're looking at, but the prices at the moment range from around about 45p a kilowatt for a fast charge from BP Pulse, all the way up to something you're approaching sort of 60p, 57, 58, 59p a kilowatt across various networks now to complete a rapid charge. So that includes things like Genie Point, Shell. Who else? We've got Instavolt, as you saw on the slide with them next to the McDonald's earlier. GridServe is currently around 48p a kilowatt. So that'll be the ones on the major kind of trunk roads. But yeah, it is quite varied, and I would suggest if you are looking at this, you have a look at ZapMap, which is where this screenshot came from. Do have a look around your area, because it is a really good resource in terms of the number of charge points it has on it across the country. I think it's something above 90% of all of the charge points that exist that are publicly accessible are on ZapMap, and it might even be more than that as well. So do have a look. It's certainly worth having a browse. Thinking about your fleet again, if you use fuel cards at the moment, there is an option for electric fuel cards. So Allstar currently have their Allstar One electric card, and that gives you access to kind of all those charge point networks you can see on the slide there. Probably the most useful ones there, probably things like EV charging. Genie Point also have quite a wide network, as do Osprey. So there's certainly options around that. Octopus Energy are doing a similar thing with electric juice. Haven't got quite as many operators, I don't think, just yet. And ZapMap are doing the same thing similar thing as well, and offering a combined payment solution. So you go through the ZapMap app, and you have the option, if you're paying for premium, you have the option there of being able to pay for your charging through ZapMap as well. Although in some cases for that one, I think you do pay a small premium just for the convenience of going through the app, as you might expect. And we'll send these slides around so you've got this graphic to kind of refer back to. But this is kind of how we go around kind of building the business case for a switch to EV. So thinking about the opportunities you've got, what are the duty cycles that your vehicles run, what and where are the appropriate alternatives to a diesel vehicle? Are they electric vehicles? Are they something smaller? Understand the costs, and that's around the whole life cost analysis. It's worth saying there also you can, in many cases, and our fleet team regularly recommend this when they do a fleet review, they will talk about owning an electric vehicle for longer than you would keep an ICE vehicle on your books. And you need to think, when you're kind of costing that up, think about the grants and the tax benefits as well. where could your vehicles charge? Could they charge at a depot? Do they need to charge when they're out in public? And thinking about kind of route optimization and the duty cycles that your vehicles run again as well there. And I guess the biggest thing that we haven't really talked about yet is driver acceptance. So if you're thinking about this, it's best not to just whip a car out of somebody's hands and then plonk them back with an EV when they're not expecting it. It can be a bit of a surprise for a lot of people. It can involve a little bit of behavior change. It can involve perhaps some changes to their driving style and the way that they drive and how they're driving. Get your drivers on board, and the research certainly that we've seen around that, when councils do this, it certainly works much better when the drivers are told about it in advance, and the officers work with the drivers of the vehicles to make sure that they're on board with it, rather than it just being kind of a bit of a surprise when they come into work one morning. And there is specific training that you can find as well from some of the companies that will help your drivers to maximize the range they're getting out of those vehicles as well. So it's certainly worth doing that piece of work. It might take a bit longer. It's certainly worth doing that engagement first to get to that stage. Right, that's a little bit more from me. Back to Heather to talk about some of the particular SME support that's out there. Heather. You are still on mute.
Sorry, clearly made a mistake there. Thanks so much. So if we go on to the support that's for SMEs, there are 2 grants available for workplace charging. The first one is called Workplace Charging Grant Scheme. This allows you up to 40 sockets across each applicant site. So you could have 1 socket at each 40 sites, or 40 sockets at 1 site. And it gives you up to 75% of the cost towards a charge points up to £350. Some charge points, dependent on what you might want to be getting. If you wanted a very basic charge point, could be up to about £1,500. If you are going for a whole suite of them, it could be more around about the £2,000 mark, depending on how many you're going to put in. You don't need a actual low emission vehicle to apply, because of course it's more to try and help the workplaces support electric vehicles, and that is for any off-street, basically required for any off-street charging for staff, visitors or fleet use. On the second grant scheme, they can't be used for the same charge points that you're putting in, but you can apply for both. So Mark, if you go on to the next one, it's called the EV Infrastructure Grant for Staff and Fleets. This one basically allows you to apply for 5 grants of up to £15,000, and you must provide dedicated 5 parking spaces for electric vehicles. Of course, this is very much for companies of 150 or less, basically, staff. And there's a lot more information. We'll provide the links out at the end. So I know that we've only got a few minutes, so I'll kind of cover the resources that we've got. We've got a lot of online resources. I'll provide a link in there. I know that Alice is going to provide a short review on some of the transport elements, and we'll answer some of the questions. You might see that some are starting to come through in the answer, but we will remain on to answer some of the kind of larger questions as well. So Alistair.
Right, so one of the best things you can do is to sign up to our investment team's business newsletter. So there will be a link once you see the slides there. We've obviously got the great big Green Week coming up in September, so you can come along and see what's happening in Bedfordshire. Up the next slide there, Mark. And there's a fair bit of information on the Bedford Borough Council website, again via links that you can have a look at. I mean, just thinking also about we've got a slide on the emails as well, Mark. So that next one, some people that you can get in contact with. So there's a number of local organisations where you can, I suppose, network and ask other businesses what they're doing. Do bear in mind that there are some local companies that provide things such as charging points. For example, BP Pulse is based in Luton, with just a a new company has just started up in Stuartby, a company called Evios, who also provide electric charging points. They're going to be employing 60 people there. So there is a sort of a local element to the EV industry as well. So do look for local suppliers. And of course, we've got our hub by the View Cinema in Bedford, where there are lots and lots of various charging points at different speeds that anyone can use as part of the public network. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alistair. So it is now bang on 2:30. So if you do have to drop off, thank you very much for coming. We will make the slides and the recording available along with any answers to the questions through Bedford Council in due course. But if you are able to stay on, we will endeavour to do our best to get through some of the questions just now as well. Heather, have you got some questions ready for us to have a look at?
Yes, so I'd probably say that the one question that I haven't been able to answer whilst typing in the background has been, when starting to look at the different sectors to provide electric vehicle charging, so for staff, customers and fleet, what point would you tender and get an industry partner on board? Is it better to have a holistic approach to installation? Is there any examples that businesses have done? I know that's quite a large part, and maybe it's quite useful to kind of reflect on what the council has been doing with some businesses as well on advice.
Yeah, I think it depends kind of what you're thinking of here, whoever asked this question. If you've only got a couple of spaces, probably not worth getting an industry partner on board. You can go through kind of your standard electrical contractor to do that. Worth saying, actually, there is a list of certified EV charge point installers available on the government website. So it could be as simple as getting somebody there who can install charge points and selecting the charge points that you think would work for you. Equally, if you've got multiple depots, multiple sites, multiple offices, or bigger car parks, and you want to kind of make that bigger provision, it may well be worth getting an industry partner on board. I don't know that there's kind of that we would have kind of, if you have X many spaces, or if you're looking at a project of X many charge points, definitely it's then time to get an industry partner on board. But it just depends on kind of what you're comfortable doing yourselves, and how much work you've got time to put into that. Heather, Alistair, do you have anything else to add on that one?
No, not really for me. I say there is a list of EV improved installers as part of the workplace charging scheme and the other EV fleet and grant scheme. So they're kind of a list of installers that you can basically get in touch with. Of course, you will have to apply for the funding, and then they will basically, you hand it to the installer, they will take the money off. So your final bill will basically have the grant taken off. So I think very much, my first step would be check your energy capacity of your building, what you're looking at putting in, if you're putting solar panels in, or you're going to reduce your energy, and then kind of building it up, because of course the more vehicles you have, you probably will need to talk to your district network operator. So and they might at the moment incur costs that are quite high. So a step-by-step approach, and then when you're starting to get into the wider fleet, if you've got looking at 10 to 20 vehicles, maybe start to engage slightly higher, but for the smaller vehicles and ad hoc, add to the system as you need.
Great, thanks, Heather. Anything else you think we could pick up now usefully? Sorry, no, go on, Heather. No,
I think one of the most interesting that came through, I know I've tried to answer probably very shortly, so apologies, Andrew, it was around about the super hubs. Are they going to be installed by the large charge point operators? Are there going to be many that are council kind of funded? I've kind of answered it in a way, in terms of the installations are mainly done by the charge point operators in terms of installation, and that's because of course skill sets and also the costs of these kind of projects are quite massive, huge. You might have seen a recent report that showed that only 15% of councils actually have dedicated electric vehicle resource within the council. So that's something that's being looked at by government. There's £50 million that's been put aside as part of the local electric vehicle infrastructure project. It's currently in a pilot phase, due for announcement next month on who's won that. So there'll be a couple of pilots, and then there'll be 400 million release next year with this 50 million. Just looking at how that can be distributed in the right ways. You know, is it going to be engineering and installation, or is it going to be more tender? Is it going to be more giving businesses information? We don't quite know how that's going to be shaped, but this pilot project, and that will look at huge rapid hubs, but to smaller. But the main thing is to try and get some form of public infrastructure support. But where it's on private land, usually there's not very much a council can do other than the planning process to support whether it's in the right location. And most of those, of course, will be on the motorway, which will be led more by the motorway services. So again, they're privately invested and managed. So I wish that there was a one fits all answer to that. But yeah, it's just because, you know, those projects are going from, you know, £1,000 per charge point to almost 30,000 to 50,000 pound per charge point when you get into the really big charge point. And if you have a battery storage system, you're looking at probably 80 plus. So they are quite expensive systems, and they will reduce in cost with some upcoming changes that are coming in from April with the district network operators. But if there's anything else you want to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But I think the one thing I would say is companies like Shell and obviously BP have bought themselves a charge point provider. So you will see some chargers popping up in some Shell stations. I think Shell have bought Osprey. BP bought what was Charge My Car is now BP Pulse. And one of the slides that we showed earlier that Heather talked through, I think it was an example of a Shell station that they've converted entirely to electric vehicle charging. Or rapid chargers. That's in London, but obviously if they've done it as a demonstrator, so if successful, they'll start rolling that out more widely, obviously. At the moment, electric forecourts, the name electric forecourts can probably be most associated with GridServe, who's relatively new-ish onto the scene, but they bought out the Ecotricity charging network that was all the motorway service stations until a couple of years ago. And they're now looking at expanding that. And as Heather said, they've got a couple of kind of specific electric vehicle forecourts, one in Braintree, one in somewhere in not Nottingham, Norfolk, Norwich way, and they're planning one down in East Sussex as well. Certainly.
Yeah, I think one of the final questions that might be really useful is, could you go to slide 29, Mark? Yes. In terms of somebody asked around about the different fuels. So the slides will be all available at the end, and I know that we've got 5 people hanging on. So, but really, in terms of different fuels, the reason that we talk about electrification kind of really much focusing is on energy efficiency. So as you can kind of see here, we've got the different fuel types: electricity, petrol, diesel, hydrogen, and of course there are biodiesels that I mentioned. So I've dropped in the line HVO policy from EST around kind of some of the unintended consequences around fuels, but of course you've got anaerobic digestion plants and things like that. So what we usually say is it's just looking at the energy efficiency of that vehicle. So as you can see from hydrogen, for example, it is quite costly per kind of 100 kilometers compared to electricity and petrol. Of course, prices will probably come down, but you're also looking at availability of vehicles. There are very limited hydrogen vehicles. So we very much, you know, we are technology agnostic. You know, we don't prefer one fuel over another, but it is very much using the right fuel for the right purpose is a key thing that we say. You know, if it's the electricity doesn't provide you the vehicle that you need, you know, is it something that you can look to those in the future? But of course, there's a lot of work and discussions going on with the unintended consequences of each fuel, but they will be needed. You know, it can't just be electric on its own. But I thought I'd just kind of raise that with you, as that's one aspect. But some councils have, you know, bio plants really close by. So if there's a local supply chain, you know, just look at that energy efficiency and where it's best to be used in that kind of sphere, and have those kind of open questions and ask those questions before you jump fully in. But we can kind of support on that. But really, I think most of it we have answered, Mark, and I appreciate that most people are filtering off, but I really do appreciate every say. It's really enjoyable. Yeah,
brilliant. Thanks, Heather. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, everybody, those of you that have been able to hang around till the bitter end. We'll close the webinar now, but we'll get in touch with Alistair and we'll send around the recording and the slides in due course when we can. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.